Saint Teresa of Ávila, mystic, reformer, doctor of the Church. Her writings chart a soul's profound journey towards God, but the language she uses of burning, wounding, longing, even spiritual marriage, has led many to ponder its intense spiritual passion. Is this earthly passion cloaked in piety, or something far more profound? Today, we're not shying away from Saint Teresa's most intense and evocative passages. We'll dive deep into her actual words from The Life, The Interior Castle, and The Way of Perfection, exploring how her descriptions of divine union utilize the vocabulary of human love, and why this has sparked such fascination and debate. This is an analysis of language that pushes boundaries. The mystic's dilemma, voicing the inexpressible. Before we dissect her words, remember the core challenge. Mystics try to describe experiences beyond ordinary language. Teresa herself lamented this, writing in The Interior Castle.
Often, being in these raptures, my body is levitated from the ground, and even though the spirit delights, the members are not without their share of pain.
Already, the physical is entwined with the spiritual. To convey this, mystics often turn to analogy. And what's more powerful than human love? Saint Teresa operated within the rich, nuptial mysticism tradition, using the Song of Songs' passionate imagery of bride and bridegroom to express the soul's deep connection with God. This context is crucial for understanding her vocabulary. The wound of love, longing, and divine touch. Teresa frequently speaks of being wounded by God's love, an experience both profound and exquisitely desired. In The Life, she offers vivid insight into this spiritual embrace.
It seemed to me that the Lord was present. He showed himself to be within me, especially in my heart. I saw him, as it were, in a mirror. This vision is so subtle that the soul cannot tell whether it is body or spirit.
This blurring of perception is key. She elaborates on this wound further.
When this arrow is drawn out, it certainly seems that the Lord draws out the very innermost being with it. So powerfully does it inspire love. The intensity is not bodily but spiritual, although the body does not fail to share in it somewhat, even a great deal.
Here, the spiritual, inspiring love has such force it feels as if her very being is involved. The profound imagery is undeniable. This isn't a gentle affection, it's a consuming spiritual passion. She describes the soul state as
like one who has received a profound touch and complains with gentle sighs but cannot help himself.
The passivity, the overwhelming nature of the divine touch of love, and the resultant complaining, a form of prayerful longing, are described in terms that parallel intense, even profoundly moving, human love. The transverberation, ecstasy in detail. We must return to her most famous description of mystical ecstasy, the transverberation. Teresa recounts the angelic encounter in The Life.
I saw an angel close by me. In his hands, I saw a great golden spear, and at the iron tip there seemed to be a point of fire. This he plunged into my heart several times, and it penetrated to my innermost being.
The visual is intensely impactful. She continues to describe the aftermath.
When he drew it out, he seemed to draw them out also, and to leave me all on fire with a great love of God. The intensity was so great that it made me moan, and yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this excessive intensity that I could not wish to be rid of it. The soul is satisfied now with nothing less than God.
The language of penetration, fire, moaning, intense feeling, and overwhelming sweetness is potent. For Teresa, This was a caress of love from God, so gentle yet so powerful, it absorbs it, the soul, in that delight. The intensity here is not suffering in the negative sense, but a profound divine encounter that overwhelms the senses, a glorious delirium, a heavenly madness. It's the body and soul stretched to their limits by divine love. Spiritual betrothal and marriage, the language of intimate union. In the interior castle, Teresa charts the soul's progress towards God. The later mansions involve spiritual betrothal and finally, spiritual marriage. She uses the analogy of human courtship and marriage with striking intimacy. Describing spiritual betrothal, she writes,
His Majesty desires to prepare the soul. He bestows on it such great raptures that they deprive it of its senses. For he desires that the soul should understand nothing beyond the fact that it is enjoying him.
Here, enjoying him and the loss of senses point to an all-consuming experience. Of spiritual marriage, she uses powerful metaphors.
It is like what we see when rain falls from heaven into a river or a spring. There is nothing but water there, and it is impossible to divide or separate the water belonging to the river from that which fell from heaven. Or as if a tiny streamlet enters the sea, from which it will find no way of separating itself.
She also speaks of it as two wax candles that are so joined that the flame is one, or as if the wick and the light and the wax are all one, and concludes,
Here there is no more separation. The soul remains continuously with its God in that center.
While explicitly spiritual, the language of total union, of two becoming one, of remaining continuously with its God, echoes the ideals of complete devotion and intimacy found in human marriage vows, but elevated to a divine plane. The longing for this union is palpable throughout her work. The drunkenness of divine love. Teresa often describes the effects of these divine encounters as a kind of spiritual intoxication or drunkenness. In the way of perfection, she speaks of prayer that leads to a state where
the soul is, as it were, inebriated. It seems not to be itself, but to be mad with a divine madness.
This drunkenness signifies a loss of self-control, being overwhelmed by a force greater than oneself, a common trope in love poetry. She says of this state,
The will is all consumed with love, while the understanding and memory are, it seems, almost lost.
Love, the will, dominates reason and memory, a characteristic of profound infatuation, here directed Godward. The soul's thirst and God as living water. Another powerful set of metaphors Teresa employs is that of thirst and water. The soul thirsts for God. In the way of perfection, she writes,
O Lord, how a soul that has arrived at this state longs for the true life. Its thirst is intolerable.
God is the living water that alone can quench this existential thirst. The encounters with God are like drinking from this spring.
Oh, what it is for a soul that is dying of thirst, as I say, and a thirst so distressing that it cannot be borne to see itself at the very brink of the water.
The anticipation and relief are described with an almost desperate intensity. This language of thirst and satiation, while common in spiritual writing, gains a particular force in Teresa due to the sheer impact of her descriptions. The distressing nature of the thirst and the overwhelming relief of the water feel deeply embodied. Interpreting the intense spiritual language, divine love versus sublimation. So how do we synthesize these profound often deeply impactful descriptions. One modern psychological perspective might suggest sublimation, that Teresa, as a celibate nun, unconsciously channeled intense energies into her spiritual life, and her mystical language reflects this. However, this view often fails to fully appreciate the rich theological and mystical tradition Teresa inherited, particularly nuptial mysticism. It also risks reducing profound spiritual experiences to mere psychological phenomena, which Teresa herself would have utterly rejected. For her, God was the source of all love, infinitely more real and fulfilling than any created love. What Teresa seems to be doing is using the entirety of her human capacity for feeling, including the intensity and vocabulary associated with profound human love and even physical sensation, to try and articulate an experience of divine love that is total. God's love isn't just an intellectual concept for her. It's an all-consuming fire, a wound, a piercing, an intoxicating drink, an inseparable marriage. She writes in The Interior Castle about divine touches that are
so subtle and delicate that there is no way of naming them, but the soul understands that it is something very precious, even though it cannot say what it is.
Yet she must try to name it, and so she reaches for the most powerful analogues she knows, the language of intense human love and union. The intense spiritual passion in Saint Teresa, then, is not about a misdirected or repressed earthly desire. It is the language of a soul utterly enamored of God, using the most potent metaphors of human experience to point towards a divine love that ultimately transcends all human categories, yet can only be hinted at through them. Her descriptions of physical sensations accompanying spiritual ecstasy are not a distraction from the divine, but an affirmation that the entire human person, body and soul, is touched and transformed by God. As she says of one rapture,
It seems that the Lord wants the soul to understand from that very place where Adam fell, that what he is giving it is something so great.
even the body shares in this redemptive touch. Saint Teresa's genius lies in her fearless articulation of these inner states. She wasn't afraid to use bold, impactful language because her experience of God was overwhelming, demanding the strongest words she could find. Her profound spiritual descriptions are the sound of a soul set ablaze by divine love, struggling to sing its consuming fire. What do you think about Saint Teresa's passionate language? Can human words ever truly capture divine experience? Share your thoughts below. And for more explorations into the depths of history and spirituality, be sure to subscribe.